they really had nothing left for them except just survive.
Probably the first psychosocial issue after a disaster is survival. So,
But there were so many areas that never even got no food at all. And
spread you want? And he was even asking me, what spread you want? And he was even giving me a choice.
goods that were coming in already wrapped up. The wrapping was being taken off and it was being replaced by new wrapping from the
And she asked me if I already ate, because I noticed that they have truckloads of loaves of bread.
to their place being beaten after being walking sort of like 4 hours just so they can take some food back, and they're having their food taken from them as well.
Life in general is becoming more and more something like in survival, and less what we would like to have as normal. So climate change is a fact of life.
On the other hand, there is the loss of jobs, the loss of family, the loss of institutions which keep alive the emotional and spiritual life of an individual.
But this is the first time our responders were taken care of spiritually. So, how I wish the rest of my teams were here. There are about 30 of them, more than 30 of them.
So, participating in this seminar or this retreat has somehow helped in alleviating the burden.
And just as the plane was about to land, I saw the devastation as if there was not even a single structure standing. And in myself, I was asking where me and my team were gonna start. And
At that time, you could see the scene of survival of the fittest.
How did that make you feel?
On 8th November 2013, Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda tore through the Philippines. More than 6,000 people were drowned and swept away by the storm surge that raised the level of the Western Pacific Ocean by 21 feet. The Brahma Kumaris were called by Senator Shahani and Dr. June Lopez with a group of psychologists and psychiatrists to help alleviate the lingering trauma of the survivors.
Dr. Lopez, who is a psychiatrist, brought us all together. In other words, some members of the Brahma Kumaris, artists, doctors, social workers, police officers, people who were in charge of government programs in terms of child and women's protection, firefighting brigades, those who had to enforce the municipal laws, the local government officials, etc. So I think it was a good gathering of people who could, in their own professional specialties, could really help.
I'm Telma Barrera. The bigger organization I belong is the Department of Health, but I work as a psychiatric nurse at the National Center for Mental Health, the biggest mental hospital in our country, in the Philippines. And I am the designated Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Program Director. So I oversee deployment. I'm the one deploying teams. At the same time, I do training for people to be able to provide psychosocial support to survivors in times of disasters. So I don't only train the Department of Health people, but also other government agencies, non-government, and even professional organizations.
Tell me who you are and what you do.
My name is Glenn Revita. I'm a nurse at the National Center for Mental Health.
And you were in Manila receiving the survivors. What does that mean, receiving the survivors?
After Typhoon Yolanda struck, uh, the victims or the survivors of the typhoon, who had nothing left for them there, decided to board the C-130s of the Air Force and the U.S. Air Force and come to Manila to seek aid. And we were part of the group who were there to receive them, provide psychosocial first aid and counseling if needed. That's mostly the scope of our.
Hi.
You are Richard Parker, and you are a BK since 14 years, and you have businesses here and there. You travel a lot all over the world, and one of your businesses is near Tacloban, and you were around at the time when the storm came. Can you describe what you experienced?
Sure. No one really knew just how powerful the storm they was expecting, and so no one was really prepared.
Here we are in Tacloban, about 5 months after the typhoon and storm surge, known sometimes as Haiyan and sometimes as Yolanda. And this is Betty, who is a student of Raj Yoga, Brahma Kumaris, and this is about all that's left of your school, right?
Right, it is.
So here we are in what was the school. Tell me what happened that night.
It's early in the morning.
Early morning.
Yes, and there are lots of, the wind so strong, blowing off the roof. As you can see, walls and roof. And another thing is that the storm surge, it's as high as, it's really very high.
There's 27 feet, I think.
Something like that. And it really would drive.
And what is a storm surge? This is something new. I think there's not even a word for storm surge here in the Philippines.
No, this is the first time we've heard about it.
And what was the actual experience of the people who were affected by Yolanda? Because I believe no one expected or knew what a storm surge was going to be.
Yeah, they knew that there's a strong typhoon. They usually experience typhoon in the area. They were told about the storm surge, but that was the first time a warning of a storm surge was given. So they didn't know what a storm surge is. I personally didn't even know that it's a storm surge.
Problem is, the water itself, this is the first time we really experienced.
So tell me about the water. It was, somebody said Tacloban is like a funnel and the wind got trapped in here.
And it's like a whirlpool.
Carried the water from the bottom of the ocean and dumped it on top of the town.
Yes, that's very true. That's what you said is true, yes.
Surge. Had they been told it's a similar to a tidal wave, they could have been more prepared. But as they narrated, they saw the wind whirling on the ocean, especially those survivors we have talked to who are living in the coastal areas, because the place is really a coastal area. They saw the wind whirling on the sea and then gathering all the water and then throwing it on the ground. That's why when water entered their houses, they describe it as a washing machine. So they were all twirling inside the house, and then they even describe how their body touched with one another, packing their head to the others until they saw some friends and relatives perish on the water, and it's really devastating.
And when it hit, it came with such a force that, well, what happened in Ormoc, it pulled down everything in Ormoc. So, because I was only an hour from Ormoc, I got to hear everything that was going on in Ormoc. And then we heard what was happening in Tagaytay, and it was quite it was scary, very scary, and
I headed the 9-man team sent to Tacloban, the first 55-man team from the Department of Health, coming from 9 hospitals, and the mission was to augment the services of the only existing hospital right after Yolanda struck.
I left Hilongos to go to Cebu because the boat started working again, and I went to go and stay in a hotel there, where they were actually preparing to do some work with the Red Cross. So I offered to give my services, basically, and so we spent a few days segregating hundreds of kilos of rice, and we were then getting on a boat, taking it to Omok, and then taking some to Globan.
What your personal experience was when you reached Tacloban, how many days after Yolanda?
Okay, so we were there on day 4. It happened on the 8th. So we were there on the 12th, on November 12th.
What did you see?
And it was very devastating, heartbreaking, because I'm familiar with the place. I have seen the beauty of the place. I've just been there in May, few months before Yolanda, for doing a training for the health workers.
And one of the things that we can see is that the degree of anxiety that people live in on a continuing basis, so they're getting higher and higher.
And just as the plane was about to land, I saw the devastation, as if there was not even a single structure standing. And in myself, I was asking where me and my team were gonna start. And as far as my experience with disaster providing psychosocial support, it surpassed the devastation I saw in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, after the Indian Ocean tsunami.
So what was your experience when you got up that morning?
It was totally distraction into my decided I have not been into this our studies in meditation, biological meditation. Really, I would be so depressed because everything that I'm going through is trying.
It was a sad thing to see. It really was a sad thing to see. They wasn't able to sort of like turn to their religion or anything like that, You're
very much part of the Brahma Kumaris since about 30 years, and we have had a retreat here that you've been participating in after another visit to Tacloban with some of the people who are the first responders. What's been your experience of doing this kind of retreat for people of those professional backgrounds?
Well, I learned many things. I think the most important one, as I had previously said, was that rehabilitation of flood victims, of victims of natural disasters is a complex issue, because first there is the physical relief and rehabilitation, food, clothing, shelter. Then on the other hand, there is the loss of jobs, the loss of family, the loss of institutions which keep alive the emotional and spiritual life of an individual.
That's one of the points that emerged in our discussion and with the different people that we met, the different groups we met, was that there's a great increase in the use of alcohol after Yolanda, and a great increase in sexual aggression and gambling. So these behaviors, these are addictive behaviors. gives, which are responses to stress, and which are, from a spiritual point of view, they are responses of weakness. And so what would be a response of strength, you see, is that you amplify your capacity to endure, your capacity to face, your capacity to adapt, you see. But fewer and fewer people can do that, and more people are having the negative response to increased anxiety, increased stress. And so there's kind of a demand by the universe on humanity saying your ability to handle these things has to increase.
So what did you see when you were on the ground?
When from the airport, we traveled for an hour to reach the hospital. There were still a lot of debris and cadavers on the streets. So, and then I saw what they called looting there, and people were coming to and fro on the streets. All people were on the streets. And
Well, you were telling something about that looting in our meeting the other day, that it wasn't actually looting. What was it?
That is my personal perception, because when you're in crisis, especially that particular disaster, where people would like to do anything together, and probably the first psychosocial issue after a disaster is survival. So they knew, since there was problem in accessibility of transportation, they knew that help will not be coming in a few days. So they tried to they ransacked the warehouses, but some owners of the warehouses allowed their warehouses to be ransacked because they were already destroyed by the water, the stocks inside. So might as well, I talked to some owners of warehouses, they might as well share it to the people, even the rice warehouse, the canned goods, the frozen meat, because electricity was not restored months after. So they will not benefit from those stuff anymore. So might as well give that away to the people.
And there was so many people outside. It was pouring down with rain. They still had no shelter because at that time there was no tents for them. But we would get there and distribute the food. But there was lots of areas that weren't seen to, that suffered the most, from what I can see. I know the Tagloban took a big hit with the sea surge and that, but there were so many areas that never even got no food at all.
And as I have seen, the people who first access the warehouse don't get all the stuff for themselves, but they share it to all the people on the streets. They throw it on the streets. In fact, we were even given some biscuits, a bottle of water, or iced tea, and even coffee strips.
And you encountered also people profiting from the material that was destined for the impoverished people.
You know, I learnt a lot of history as well. You know, the Tagloban area was pretty much run by a family from the Marcos regime, when Marcos was in power.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I understood, the president now, his father was executed by the Marcos, and so the president of the Philippines, there was no interest of helping the people of Tagloban. But you know, regards to profiting, I mean, there was all sorts of things that I was seeing. A lot of the goods that were coming in already wrapped up. The wrapping was being taken off and it was being replaced by new wrapping.
And on the third day, I met a friend from the Red Cross. I usually meet him in meetings related to disaster, and she asked me if I already ate, because I noticed that they have truckloads of loaves of bread. And then I told him, I have not eaten, but if you will not give food just for me, then I'll just say thank you. But if you can give me food for my entire nine-man team, then I'll be grateful. And he said, yes, I'll give you what spread you want. And he was even asking me, what spread you want? And he was even giving me a choice.
There was...
So people were making political capital.
Absolutely. They were gaining from this, what was taking place, without a doubt.
Something very interesting happening in the world. And say, for example, like in Warsaw, what we saw was that at the very start of Warsaw, there was news from the Philippines. And there was this huge super typhoon that had come. And the whole of the gathering was shocked. And then there was one particular individual who was from that region and who was representing the Philippines in the climate change negotiations. And he stood up and he spoke. And this is actually the month of fasting that they initiated at that point. They said that let there be a time that the world comes together and fasts to show sympathy and empathy for victims of climate change.
In solidarity with my countrymen who are struggling to find food back home, and with my brother who has not had food for the last 3 days, with all due respect, Mr. President, and I mean no disrespect for your kind hospitality, I will now commence a voluntary fasting for the climate. This means I will voluntarily refrain from eating food during this COP until a meaningful outcome is in sight.
And so at that time, it was very clear that the sort of things that are happening in the world now, whether it was Hurricane Katrina or all the things that have happened subsequently, it feels as if it's not that we have to theorize about these things, but it literally is that nature is showing us that it's come to a state of breakdown and shaking us, telling us, wake up, do something. And so that is the reality of our times today.
And so what we do among BKs, Brahma Kumaris, is we use meditation as a mechanism to increase our capacity. And
at that time, you could see the scene of survival of the fittest.
How did that make you feel?
I'm so happy that I have an understanding, a spiritual understanding. That great sadness, definitely a great sadness I had for them. I had a lot of mercy as well.
And we also experience that circumstances are also coming at us with greater intensity and greater frequency.
Bombing incidents, the earthquake in Bohol, the Zamboanga crisis, the armed conflict, the Maguindanao massacre.
And for the rest of the world, sooner or later, everyone is going to have to experience pretty big disasters. So, how did that prepare you? How did that make you feel about what's to come for others?
You know, actually, before what happened in Tagaytay, a month before we experienced the earthquake as well, you know, what happened in Bohol. And these natural disasters are happening really on a frequent level. I mean, after that earthquake, I mean, there was over 3,000 aftershocks. And so you're expecting the next one. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there was another small earthquake during the course of that week as well. And they're happening all the time.
And so what to do?
And the only thing that we feel where we can actually make a difference is the process of strengthening the self from within. And so that is what we try to do. I mean, another part of it is making our life as simple as possible.
You know, global warming is definitely taking, you know, moving forward. And, you know, it won't be long before it starts to happen here. I mean, what happened this year in the UK with the floods, it's only going to get worse and not get better. But people really need to, I don't think there's not a great deal that they can do to prepare themselves from it from happening, but they have to prepare themselves mentally for what's going to be happening.
How do you prepare yourself mentally?
Yeah, taking an understanding of Baba's knowledge has definitely given me an understanding where there is no fear. There is no fear of passing. You know, it's all a part of life. You know, it's just as beautiful leaving the body as it is as entering the body. And knowing what we know, it makes you fearless.
Thank you. We in the Brahma Kumaris learn, as a matter of fact sometimes, because we are taught that we are souls, that the body is a costume which we shall leave, and the world which we should look with disinterest is really a passing show. Everything is temporary, as the Buddhists also believe. And so I think we are able to be light, we're able to enjoy what we have for the moment, but are able also to let go. Now, these are very important virtues, if you want to call it that way, or capabilities of a human being when one is faced with these enormous loss which natural disasters can bring.
So, participating in this seminar or this retreat has somehow helped in alleviating that burden, taking off that burden, and being able to cope, if for a lack of a better word, I use cope. But we can already cope with the problem. It's just that, you know, the feeling of it's still there. It needs to be removed. Yeah, this exercise has helped me, especially when you talked about pain alleviation. That was really helpful. I really found that very, very helpful.
In this gathering with psychiatrists, doctors, social workers, artists, were able to learn that rehabilitation is a community effort, that it takes a whole group of specialties people to bring together to rehabilitate lives, to begin all over again, even if one has had a rich, long life. And really, for BKs, to know and to be able to teach others that the resources of recovery and relief are within. It is for free. You really don't need so much outside help, that in the end it is really you who will have to will it, and with the grace of God, with His presence and assistance, everything will be possible.